For our next session, I would like to invite Mr. Manh-Hung Tran, Managing Partner, BMV and a member of Baker McKenzie, who will be moderating the next session. Hung and his fellow panelists will be discussing the franchising outlook and opportunities in Vietnam, on what contributes to the attractiveness of the Vietnamese market and how we can tap onto this greenfield opportunity. Over to you, Hung.
Right. Hello, everyone. I hope you are keeping safe and healthy wherever you are. My name is Manh-Hung, and I'm the managing partner from BMVN, which is a member firm of Baker McKenzie. I head up our firm IP, technology, and franchise practice in Vietnam. I'm very delighted to moderate today's panel discussion, focusing on franchising outlook and opportunities in Vietnam. Well, before you meet with my panelists, I would like to touch on a quick activity on the main topic of discussion today. Over the past few years, Vietnam enjoyed some of the fastest economic growth in the world. Our GDP in Vietnam has remained consistent in the past decade. Most significantly, in 2020, when the COVID-19 hit the Southeast Asian shores, Vietnamese government was quite quick in responding, and now they're trying to keep the effect to a minimum. During the global pandemic, Vietnam was the only economy in the region recorded a growth in GDP. As you may know, some of the very first franchise store, in Vietnam was back in 1975, like Mobile, Exo, or Shell. Right now, with extensive economic expansion, Vietnam has been considered as an emerging destination for many franchising brands due to its high economic growth, rapidly rising incomes, large consumer markets, and young population. So prior to the pandemic, franchise was one of the most attractive channels for investors to do business in Vietnam. Even though the pandemic is still now in here and there, with the great effort from the Vietnamese government, from our people, I still believe that we are back on track to develop the national economy. In that context, franchise is seen to be a very potential opportunity for both local and international foreign brand owners to develop their activities in Vietnam. With that in mind, today we will conduct this panel discussion to focus on franchising outlook and opportunities in Vietnam. Joining me today, I'm so lucky to have our panelists. First of all, Ms. Nguyen. She is the advisor for Project H44 under the Vietnam Ministry of Science and Technology on startup and innovation. She is the chairwoman of Vietnam Business Angel Network and Open Innovation in Vietnam. I have to say, personally speaking, I'm her big fan. So I enjoy her posts, every day on LinkedIn and Facebook. So welcome, Vivian. Secondly, please join me to welcome Dr. Abdul Rashid. Dr. Rashid is the Executive Director and CEO of FLAsia International College, which is a member of Kindle World International Group, Singapore. And last but not least, please welcome Mr. Nguyen. He is the CEO of Tân Kim Nhật Company. As you may know, Tân Kim Nhật Company is a local franchisee of Pablo Enterprise, Dorothea Holateta, who is the owner of the Pablo cheese tart. Khoa, I did enjoy your cheese tart. I think it's the best cheese tart in the world. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, the panelists, for joining our discussion today. Perhaps, as you may know, right now we have about 300 foreign franchise activities, registered to do business in Vietnam. I believe that in the near future, the number will be increasing. As mentioned, franchising is a business expansion method that has become increasingly popular in Asia, and Vietnam has become a popular hotspot in this aspect. So to start our discussion today, let me ask our only lady in the panelists, Ms. Vivian. So Vivian, how are you today?
I think I'm pretty positive because we get to go out again in Ho Chi Minh City.
Good. Right. Well, now, can I ask, what are the key factors that attract foreign investors in franchise areas in Vietnam? Or in other words, why Vietnam is considered a so-called Asia franchise hotspot?
I think it goes without saying that Vietnam is top 3 in the ASEAN in terms of population, only after Indonesia and the Philippines. So in terms of market scale and market size is already there. In comparison to other CLMV cluster, economic cluster, Vietnam is probably the #1 in terms of disposable income. So franchising wise, it's still a very much a seed market. To me, Vietnam is very new to franchising with huge potential growth. So obviously that makes Vietnam pretty potential for any franchisor. Business wise, franchising and licensing is one of the best ways and the most risk averse for franchisors to expand to Vietnam. I have to say, having been doing a lot of businesses in Vietnam, I have to say that the legal environment here is quite risky. And the changes in government policies can be very unexpected. So when my friends and my partners ask me, Phi, how do you advise me to actually expand to Vietnam? I always go franchising and licensing. That's probably the most convenient and risk-averse way for people to expand to such a market, to avoid legal complications, obviously. And last but not least, I think recently we heard about a lot of free trade agreement, and the latest one is RCEP, which are very much accommodating lower tax and simpler customs procedures, facilitating supply chain for the franchising and licensing sector. I think supply chain is probably one of the key in success of franchising. And so with the free trade agreements in place for Vietnam to be part of a bigger world and to be part of the global value chain, I think it does help to put Vietnam on the map of franchising.
Thank you, Vân. You do have a great talk show called Risk Opportunities that focus on sharing sustainable solutions during and after pandemic for market leaders for wider business community. So can you shed some light on sort of concern and hopes that your speaker have regarding Vietnamese economy?
Sure. So I've probably met about 52 different top entrepreneurs and executives in Vietnam over the pandemic to talk about challenges and possibilities. I have to say there are a lot of concerns. So I'll start with the concerns first. Very much unknown future, as no one can predict when this pandemic shall end. So consumer confidence index in Vietnam, as you know, Q3 of 2021 is all-time low. Even though Vietnam was a hero in 2020, we're not in 2021. And GDP growth is 1.6%, which is expected to be at the end of the year 3 to 3.5%, which is only half of what we expected the economy to be. So that's the first. Secondly, disruption is so fast during the pandemic, so dramatic for a country that's already behind in many aspects in terms of comparison to the regional and international counterparts. The SMEs in Vietnam are still very weak in their foundation. So now everyone has to work triple hard to stay afloat, to stay alive. And at the same time, yet you have to pay a lot of attention to innovate, to transform, to integrate into the new future, especially with the unavoidable acceleration of digitalization. And everyone knows that they need to be agile. Everyone talks about it, but how do you remain agile? How do you become agile in your workforce when everyone has been so used to the old habits, especially given the current emotionally unstable and mentally strained situation? So those are the most of the concerns that I see from entrepreneurs and top executives in Vietnam. But at the same time, there is hope. And the pandemic works like a natural storm. So I think it washes out very much enterprises without a great foundation and creates new opportunities for those that have been investing long-term into the solid foundation for growth. And that's a good point for especially franchise systems with good systems to thrive in Vietnam. This can be seen through over 70,000 Vietnamese companies closing their doors during the first half of 2021. And this is a new era for professionalism, long-term investment, and great news for the franchising industry. A lot of the entrepreneurs without systems and strong foundation will find themselves close their doors or their businesses, but then they will become the new investors of the franchising sector. That's the first. The second is it accelerates the overdue must of digital transformation, which with or without the pandemic is essential for future growth and sustainability. When all enterprises need to be a digital enterprise by 2030 anyway. So I think in that way, people see that this is like a push for them to have to accelerate and to be a digital enterprise. And last but not least, as a case study, I invested into a local franchisor in Vietnam called 25Fit. And I did that early 2020, right during the pandemic. And you know what? This particular brand scaled from 2 studios to 40 studios within 1.5 years of the pandemic. So I hope that says a lot about the potentiality despite the pandemic. And now that Vietnam reopens the market and reopen the green lanes for international visitors. So there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of positivity. And I think this particular talk show will bring a lot of franchisors and investors into Vietnam as well.
That's so promising to hear, Vân. In Vietnam, our people normally say there are always opportunities in risk. So what you are doing here actually created a lot of opportunities for startup and innovation companies in Vietnam. So let me turn the question to Dr. Rashid. So Dr. Rashid, from what Ms. Vân has shared with us, how do you evaluate potential of the franchise market in Vietnam, especially post-COVID-19 pandemic?
I think what Vern said, is factual, because when someone is looking to enter a foreign market, one of the things that they will be looking at would be, the demographics or in terms of population. And for us, my chairman actually entered Vietnam in the year 2000. So we've been there for 21 years. And the fact that we have lasted 21 years is because the population has grown, economic growth has been there. And I think I read a report that in ASEAN during the pandemic, Vietnam is still positive in terms of GDP. All right, so that actually tells a person who wants to invest in a franchise business that the external environment that they're going to operate in is there. Right? Of course, we're talking everything about post-COVID, but I'm very confident because if you remember when first COVID struck last year around April or May, right, the Vietnamese government was quick to actually arrest the situation. And right now, I believe they are also trying to vaccinate as many people as possible. So we are looking forward to that green lane. Right? So as what Vern mentioned about Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, I think these are all the so-called developing countries that marketing people or businesses are looking at because there's huge potential, especially in the case of Vietnam. They have a young population of below 35, if I'm not wrong. Out of the 97 million, about 60% is actually younger than 35 years old. And from a demographic point of view, I mean, that means that this is a market that has got purchasing power. They also have people, I believe today in Vietnam, you'll see a lot more double income families because the middle class, they are growing. And here, I think, if you look at the potential of the market itself, and people from the middle class are always willing to try new trends or new products or services. So I think the timing is right in terms of people who are looking at Vietnam. When I was living in Vietnam from 2015 to 2020, I mean, I've seen brands like KFC, Pizza Hut, and I'm not wrong, even McDonald's have come in, and also Starbucks. And the fact that Starbucks can come into a country where there is a strong local coffee chain, right, tells you that people view this market with a lot of positivity. All right. Other than that, I've also seen franchises like Amway, for example, which tells you that health and nutrition is also something that the Vietnamese population is concerned about. And of course, education in our business, there's been quite a large growth of language schools, because I think now Vietnam is really connected to the world, and entrepreneurs or business people recognize that other than your local language, you need to have command of at least the business language of the world, which is actually English. Right? So I think that has actually spurred quite a lot of growth in this area. So any master franchise company that's looking to find franchisees, if they avoid Vietnam, I think they'll be avoiding a very huge market in terms of potential. Right? So I think that's one area that I can contribute to what Ms. Nguyen has just mentioned.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Well, as we talk about Vietnamese company exploring opportunities available through franchising, so let's talk to Khoa. So Khoa, have your store reopened yet? And have you seen, like, customer coming back, to your stores?
Hi, Manh-Hung. Yeah, actually, customer are coming back to the stores in numbers, actually, because they have been home for so long, as Miss Miss Thivan has said, because they want to go out, they want to spend some time outside. They sit in the shop and they say that, thank God, finally I'm able to go outside. So yeah, I mean, at least it's some positive news for, especially for F&B business after the lockdown.
Right. So what, with the Pablo cheese tart, we've become quite popular now in Hanoi and one store in Ho Chi Minh City. So are you looking forward to bringing more foreign brands to Vietnam in the future?
Actually, our company, after we have been opening Pablo in Vietnam for about 3 years, we have actually considered bringing back a few more brands since last year, but obviously with the plan was put on hold because of the COVID situation. But the thing is that after this, this is actually the second lockdown in Hanoi, right? So we have to sit down and reassess what are we going to do going forward, because let's face it, the world will never be the same. After the COVID situation, it's not gonna be the same world that we have been living in, because I think that is a sentiment that a lot of people share with me. They tell me that in my lifetime, I never experienced something like this. And once you are experience something like this, it's something like a post-traumatic syndrome, So people will always be having this fear of the pandemic coming back. If it's not COVID, it might be something else. I mean, obviously we hope not, but let's face it, the risk is there. And they know that if something like that happens, what is going to be the consequences? So obviously they would be more careful when they deal both from the business side and also how they conduct themselves every day, how they have to change their lifestyle. And that would means that the way that business have to approach and go forward, in which direction will have to change as well. And so obviously a good reassessment and also a good planning of this situation have to be done.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Khoa. I'm so happy to hear that your store reopened, and I will make sure that we order more from Cheese Tart, Pablo Cheese Tart. So everyone, we talk about foreign franchise in Vietnam, meaning like incoming one. So what about Vietnamese brand expanding overseas? I'm so chuffed to see a lot of Vietnamese brand in overseas, like Cộng Cafe in South Korea or Nguyen Coffee in Singapore and Japan. So how about potentiality for Vietnamese brand to expand overseas? So Vân, can I hear your opinion on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Hùng. First of all, I really like what Khoa has to say about post-traumatic syndrome. I think we all have to accept that we're going through that difficulty at the moment, but at the same time, I have optimism bias. So I spoke at the 2 very big events by the ASEAN Franchise and Retail Chain Federation in KL, and also the 16th Indonesian Franchising and Licensing Summit last week. And I have to say that I see hope in everyone's eyes about reopening, about continuing, about developing, about getting back to developing brands and businesses. So now with the free trade agreements in place, I have to say that that I'm very positive about it. Just as a case study, so how about Vietnamese brands? Before I talk about the the opportunities and challenges of Vietnamese brands, I probably should give you a case study that during the pandemic, two of my companies, one is Arki, which is a creative education system. We signed master franchise agreements with Myanmar and Singapore. And then one of the other company that I invested in called FLAsia, which is an e-tailer franchise system, signed a master franchise agreement with Canada. So that tells you that even during the pandemic, we're actually developing internationally. So there's no stopping of Vietnamese brands going overseas. However, I think that Vietnamese brands and franchise systems are latecomers to the game. We're very much one of those markets that are late to the game of franchising. And we need a lot of help in terms of professionalizing, building solid foundations and support foundations for franchisees if we want to franchise overseas. Because without that, signing a master franchise agreement means nothing. Signing is only the starting point of either a very miserable life or a very enlightened one. So it all depends on your capability to grow, to lead, and to support people to expand. And this capability, I think, needs to be further and strongly enhanced for Vietnamese enterprises if we want to export our brands and our franchise systems abroad. I have to say I work with a lot of governments in terms of supporting SMEs to become international franchisors with the Malaysian government, with Singapore government, Saudi Arabian government. And the government has a lot of different schemes to actually support and help strengthen SMEs so that they can export their brand and their franchise system internationally. That does not exist in Vietnam yet. So we need to see a lot more help in this particular area if you want Vietnamese brands to expand internationally later on.
I can agree with you, Marvin, but actually I see hopes in your eyes, Khoa eyes, and Dr. Rashid eyes as well. So I really hope that we can touch upon a bit more in our discussion. So now let's move to a market entry strategy and how franchise can be successful in Vietnam though. So as you know, there are indeed many potentialities that make Vietnam quite an attractive destination for franchising business here after the pandemic end. I don't know actually when it will be ended. However, we still think that it will be managed very well in like few years and few months. Franchise brings a lot of benefits for franchisor and also minimize the risk for franchisee. However, as you all know, not every franchise business model is successful in Vietnam so far. So we have seen a closing of many franchise stores in Vietnam before and during pandemic. Like Gloria Jean's Coffee closed its last store back in 2017 after a decade of presence in Vietnam. But I heard they came back already. Thus, franchise come with both opportunities and challenges. So Vân, if you don't mind, can you advise, potential for franchisor who want to come to Vietnam, what do and don't think?
Thank you, Hung. I think after 20 years of international franchise development over the 4 continents, I have to say that what I'm going to say applies for everyone and not just for Vietnam, basically because in every new market is basically the same principles. I think first of all, you need a very strong partner in market development. And I'm saying market development and not financial background, because a lot of the time people look at partners with strong financial background, and which is really true. It's very essential for the success of a franchise system, but money does not solve all business issues. A lot of the time, without a strong management team and without proper understanding and the strategy to scale, the percentage of failure, I have to say, is 50% and not 20% like academically people say about franchising. People tend to negotiate really hard on franchise fee and royalty fee at the first place, spend all your energy in doing that, but not spending enough money to talk about how we scale the market in the next 10 years. And to me, how to scale the market in the next 10 years is the really meat and bone of business. It lays in efficiency and optimized operation of the franchisee business system. So there needs to be a lot more attention in that particular area than just a few negotiations about percentages. Secondly, I think during the pandemic, you really, like Khoa said, you really need to reassess your business model, right? You need to rejig your model as the next generation of business model. You have to think about O2O, about omni-channel, multi-revenue stream, lower CapEx, higher ROI. There's so much that you need to think about, and you need to rejig your model before you can start thinking about franchising again. And last but not least, I think digitalization of internal processes is super important. Imagine now that we can't travel and we have to open a new market. How do you do training online 100%? How do you do that? How do you open the market? Or should you start with e-commerce before you open your brick and mortar store? All the strategies behind need to be rethink and reassessed. If your model remains unchanged after the past 2 years, and you think about internationalizing or development or franchising again, I'm very sorry to say that we have a problem. It's practically, we have a problem in any market, not just Vietnam. So I'm not talking about turning to selling groceries and veggies temporarily to stay afloat. I'm talking about real business model innovation and digitalization of internal processes. And people really need to focus on these areas to actually make their model and their business and their franchise brand, optimized for the new normal.
Right. So you touched on the digitalization, which is really important for franchise business model in Vietnam. I think that's really interesting. So that's on the franchisor side. So Khoa, I still remember day one when you started negotiating your franchise contract with Papa Enterprise. So how would you share your experience in negotiating, working with franchisor, like international franchisor, with the audience here?
Yeah, as a franchisee, right? It actually, the reason why I started the Pablo, negotiating with Pablo is just it was a very simple story. It's just that someone visited Japan. Pablo was famous there, and they brought back a box of Pablo. And actually my daughter was just over a year old, and she absolutely loved it. So I was like, if even a small child like this, brand, then maybe I should explore more. And then I traveled to Japan, which is obviously, as Miss Vivian said, it's no longer possible now. I started coming to the store to see how they do business, and I contacted them because, to be honest, my background was not in F&B at all. I only started a local brand in 2015. So I only have like 2 years of experience then, and we don't have any international brand under our company. So it was a long and hard process, but a lot of new things that I'm able to learn in the process. And I started contacting them, and it was a very standard thing for all the international businesses. They started checking my background. They asked me to propose my idea and how I'm going to handle the business. As Miss Vivian said, actually for the brand, money is not the most important thing for them, because their international image is the most important thing for them, because the value is much higher than just getting some quick bucks in from a single local market, right? Because for example, some brands like Starbucks, for example, their stock value, it's so big that, if even a few million, dozens of millions of dollars will not compensate for a tarnished image in any market. So obviously they are looking for a partner who are able to propose an idea that they think that is good for their business in that location. So it is important for you to be able to show the brand that you are able to handle them in your local market. And then I actually discussed with them into the locations. I have to propose a location that I'm opening the shops as well. And you were there for some part of the journey as well. So you see, like when they actually visited Vietnam twice, and we first time was to actually do market research, and second time was to actually discuss in details of how the franchise can go forward and how the two companies can actually cooperate. Yeah,
Right.
and then
Yeah,
afterwards,
I still remember, a few years ago when you gave me a call and say, "Oh, Mr. Hung, I want to bring a franchise to Vietnam." I said, "Oh, are you really, seriously? So grab it, and I will support you, young man." So thank you for sharing that, Khoa. So what do you often consider when you look for a potential franchisor partner in future? So what sort of criteria you have in mind for future expansion?
I think there was some. The main problem with market like Vietnam is that since we are a third world country and we are developing really fast, the trend and the customer preference changes fast as well, especially because people now have money, right? A lot of middle class families have money, and they would be like, have some ideas of what they want or what is out there in the world from looking at like online sources like YouTube or social media online, like people, their friends or people they know from other countries, they posted the products that are available there. So they would be like, oh, in America right now, this is a hot thing, so maybe I should try that. But the problem is that even from my experience or some of my friends or business partner experience, right? A lot of business and franchises enjoy a big success initially, but then it quickly fades because people like, and I'm talking about like a decrease of 80% in terms of revenue only after a few months. It was like long queue for a month, and then the next month the shop would be like deserted. And that, it's because I stayed abroad for quite some time, and it was initially it was a very strange thing to me, like how customer can change their preference so quick. And so we started to do some market research. We started to talk with the consumers, and we found out that they themselves have no preference. They just try to imitate someone else. They say that, oh, because I see everyone else is doing it, then I tried it. And after 2 or 3 times, and some people stop doing it, and then I also stopped doing it. So when you choose a business, you have not only are able to have to be able to assess the quality of the product, the feasibility of the product, how suitable it is in the local market, but you also have to discuss with your franchisor about the plan B. Like, what if some product is not suitable? How are we going to be able to sit down and discuss a change? How are we going to actually modify or change the product to suit the customer preference? Because from my experience working with a Japan brand, they are famous for being quite rigid, like not very flexible at all. So we have a lot of problems discussing and asking for permission to change our product or the way we conduct the business to suit the market. And actually that would be, if we have more experience, I myself have more experience, I would be discussing with them before we actually go into business. But obviously at the beginning, I thought that actually keeping the formula was a good thing. But when you deal with market like Vietnam, flexibility is also a very important thing. So actually all those things are going to be put in consideration from now onwards when I started to look for franchises and international brands as well.
Well, thanks, Khoa. Well, you're right. one of the key important factors, to ensure a successful business model in Vietnam under franchise is to choose the right business partner. And of course, I want to ask Dr. Rashid, well, what do you think are the essential conditions that franchisees should have in order to conduct a successful, franchising business model in Vietnam, like, good business and management plan, knowledge of brand, and finding a franchising business? So, Dr. Rashid, can you, say a few words about that?
Okay. From my own experience, because I bought franchises, quite a number from the US and Australia. First of all, is make sure you understand the franchise you are buying and the customers that you are serving. Because as what Khoa mentioned, you can have a long queue when the store opens, and after which, you realize that it's actually a novelty product and there's no sustainability. Right? So what Khoa mentioned, that's very important. You must have a thorough understanding of the franchise business or product or service you're buying, and does it suit the market that you are in? That's one. Second is cash flow. Right? I've run businesses for over 30 years. Right? When you buy a franchise, you have to pay the fees, you have to pay royalties, but you have to remember you have other costs. Like, if you rent a shop or you rent an office space, there will be costs. You have to hire staff. All right. There will be electricity bills, etc. And quite a lot of franchisees, after 6 to 7 months, they end up with what I call a cash flow crunch. Right. The other thing is, to understand the agreement that you have signed. Because as what Khoa mentioned, right, in my own experience, some master franchises, they're very, very inflexible, right? And I'll give an example of this. When KFC went into Malaysia, they only wanted to sell their potatoes as a side dish, not realizing that the Malaysians were rice eaters, right? And this is where they had to actually change their menu to include rice. And I think from the example in Malaysia, they also went to Indonesia with rice. Although, if you go to Vietnam, I don't think they serve rice, but these are examples that I can give. All right. And of course, also to remember that, yes, you have bought a franchise, but you need to do the marketing and sales yourself, because at the end of the day, this is why, the master franchisor give you the franchise, because they give you because you have the local knowledge and you're able to grow the brand, right? And yeah, I would say that these are the 3 important areas that I like to highlight as what I call key success factors if someone is deciding to buy a franchise. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. I think adaptability is really key in order to ensure a successful franchise business model in Vietnam. Well, let's move on to talk about the franchising agreement and sort of legal requirements for franchising activities in Vietnam. So we talk a lot about franchise opportunity and market entry strategy. Having a well-built business plan is just one thing. The other thing is franchisor and franchisee. Both of them need to be well aware of the legal requirements for franchising in Vietnam. We do often recommend our client to talk to experts, like Nguyen or Khoa or Dr. Rashid, and legal counsel before they start franchising in Vietnam. The main regulation in Vietnam governing franchising activities are the Commercial Law and Decree 35. As you may know, Decree 35 have gone through some amendments, but so far the registration requirements still there. So by and large, in order to make sure that you can ensure your franchise activities are aligned and comply with the law, before start, franchising activities in Vietnam, the franchisor need to register franchising activities with the Vietnam Ministry of Industry and Trade, we call MOIT. Another thing that we often ask and advise our client is to focus on having a good quality of the Vietnamese translation of the franchising agreement. Very often, franchisor, franchisee can just ignore it because they often think that having the translation could be costly and lengthy, and sometimes it's wasting of time. But again, under local laws, there is one mandatory requirement. So if there is no Vietnamese translation of the franchising agreement, the party may be subject to some sort of like pecuniary fines under Vietnamese law. So from that angle, I'd like to ask Khoa a question. Khoa, from your experience, what do you think the local franchisee should be well aware of? and pay attention to when dealing with foreign franchisor partner, including we call the big Bible contract, like franchising contract. Khoa.
Yeah, I think many local businesses, because of the landscape, I mean, businesses in Vietnam, the law is not like in US, for example. Business law is very well defined. It's very common knowledge. But in Vietnam, a lot of the things people do are, for example, the local businesses, right? A lot of the things people do are based on like oral contracts, or they would be based on their common sense. But when dealing with international businesses, it's very important for you to actually do good, and I mean like extremely good research on the legal aspects, not only for your local market, but also where the franchisor is based. You have to understand the legal implication of all the things you're signing, all the agreements like royalty. How are you going to transfer the royalty? Because, for example, in my case, I have to transfer the royalty somewhere else, not the country that the franchisor is based on. It's on the contract, but obviously, I mean, you have to actually do research on all the terms and conditions, as I would say, in the contract. You have to understand what you're getting into, how are the taxes in the country that you're sending the money to, how are the taxes in your local market. Also the logistics is also very important. How are you going to transfer the items that you need to transfer from the franchisor to you? The importing regulations, for example, of your country, of what you're importing. That actually we had some problem with the food products when we initially imported it from Japan. So I think it's an educational process. You have to educate yourself as well, because, for example, for me, as I said, I don't have a F&B background initially, so I have to do a lot of research. And obviously, I'm very lucky to know you, and I have you whenever I have some stuff that I need to ask on. But whenever you sign something that people, especially in Vietnam, might think that it's very simple. Oh, I would be getting a contract, I agree, and I'll bring it back that I just pay enough money, and then I would be able to start the business. But actually, when you start doing it, then you would understand that there are a lot more implications rather than just, you pay the money, you sell the item to the customer, then the customer buy the item, and that's it. And it's not that simple actually in practice. So it's very important, as I mentioned, that you have to educate yourself and you have to understand exactly what you're getting into for each and every term.
Right, and perhaps I can supplement one thing, everyone. Choosing the governing law is really important to make sure that the contract is, legally valid. Many years ago, I assisted a Japanese client and a local franchisee to sign and negotiate a franchising contract. So the other side, they insist on having Japanese law as the governing law, but end of the day, when they try to terminate the contract, the condition and legal requirements for walking away from the deal is so difficult. So I think choosing the right and important the governing law, I think it's key success as well. Well, let me ask Vân. Well, I heard that you invested in many franchising, system, including a big coffee brand from Australia. So having nearly 20 years of experience in franchise business, can you share with our audience here your story and how you enter into this sort of challenging yet fascinating business?
First of all, I have to say that my heart goes to Khoa for the term flexibility, because only master franchisees and franchisees know how hard it is to actually operate a franchise system with so many constraints by the franchisor. I have been on all sides of the fence. So I have been a master franchisee, not only for Vietnam, but also for the ASEAN for some brands. I was the franchise market development manager for a listed company in Australia. And we scale from 6 countries to about 70 countries. So I had a lot of very painful experiences working with franchise systems and partners. And right now I'm investing into quite a few SMEs and startups that use franchising and licensing to scale. So on all sides of the franchising industry I have been to, I have to say that the journey is tough. The journey is tough. I know franchising and licensing is one of the best methods to scale fast and to scale internationally, especially for SMEs and startups. And recently we have seen some tech startups even using franchising and licensing to scale. So that's new to the game, which makes it very fascinating. But I have to say that when you are in this particular industry, it's not just an industry about numbers and about the games anymore. It's an industry about people. So, you know, when you see people cry, when you see people at court, when you see people, you know, risk everything, all the dollars in their saving account to buy a franchise, it's actually about humanity, it's about life, and it's about people. So I do think that you really need to look at, you really need to have very high emotional intelligence. You need empathy, you need people skills, and probably a very generous heart to generate success, because you are sharing success and not only risk. Unfortunately, not all franchise brands and systems are actually having that perspective of people-oriented in their business plan. So if you don't love people, you really can't be in this particular industry. There's so much you know, sad stories to hear from, and if you're not prepared for that, it's difficult to be part of it.
Right. Well, every journey is not rosy at all, and but again, you find yourself having a passion in franchise business. I think that's the way to go, Ven. And I'm sure that, you know, Khoa is also learning, exploring new things, and that's the key thing for us, you know, to do business in Vietnam, though. So let's move together to the last part of our discussion today about the consumer markets outlook and opportunities. So as you may know, according to the International Franchise Association, Vietnam has become quite an attractive franchising destination, like in F&B, education, healthcare, nutrition, business services, hospitality, fashion, beauty and skincare, entertainment, and convenience stores. So as most of Vietnamese population is of school aged and the nation economy is growing, skill development is essential to driving the economy forward. Vietnamese government, you know, sector has therefore accelerated the development of education to cover the need. Therefore, you know, I think we can see that franchising in the education industry is still very potential. Even people now still studying online. But I would like to ask Dr. Rashid a question. So how do you evaluate opportunities for education franchise in Vietnam in the coming years? From your experience, what was your major challenge you faced in operating in franchise college, and how did you overcome that?
Okay, first of all, I want to clarify that the Kinderworld Education Group, we do not franchise our business. We basically expand by buying the land, by building the school or college. And this has been my chairman's vision, because to him, you got to have sufficient reach in a market before you can even talk about franchising. We actually have developed a model or to franchise our preschool, right? Which, as you know, is very competitive. But we have done a franchise model or preschool based on the Singapore education system, which has been, you know, producing good results as far as math, science, and English are concerned. But the thing is, for Vietnam, if you ask me in terms of opportunity, everyone will tell you that, you know, with the growing middle class, parents want to spend more money, and they won't buy a bigger house or bigger car. They will spend on their children's education. This is a very unique Asian mentality, or I would say very strong in Vietnam. That's what I've seen, right? So that's one area. If you're looking for education franchise, right, that would be one great opportunity. Second, the people in Vietnam can read and write. This is what I tell a lot of overseas people that I meet, that Vietnam has got a highly literate society, right? And I give this example. I say in Vietnam, if you take a taxi, You show the taxi driver a card with the address written in Vietnamese, he is able to read, he's able to bring you to your destination. Not many markets have this kind of literacy, all right? I mean, you know, even if you take Indonesia, for example, literacy is not as high as in Vietnam. So again, for an education business, when you're talking to a society that has literacy of that level, then obviously it's so much easier, right? Of course, you know, one of the major challenges that you will face for education is Vietnam is a very long country. It's got 3,200 kilometers of coastline. So you know, for us, we have a school in Ha Long. We also have a school in Cần Thơ. All right. The thing is, how do you maintain the quality? Because, you know, for education, you can develop the system, you can develop the curriculum, but you are still dependent on the teachers you employ to deliver and to maintain consistency. You know, if you are running a food franchise like Khoa, who's doing the cheese tart, I think it's very easy because she just had to tell the staff, this is the formula, this is the amount you cheese you put, this is the amount of flour, etc. You get the product. But in the world of education, you have a teacher standing, and the teacher sometimes, as I say, is not a robot, all right? And this is where, you know, there will be this consistency of delivery, all right? And this is where, you know, if someone is planning to invest in an education franchise, they need to remember that, you know, if you want to expand, consistency and quality is important because, you know, social media is very powerful in Vietnam. All right, all the parents will talk about your business on social media, all right, and this is why, you know, it's important that, you know, franchisees understand that, you know, there's not, of course, besides the law, etc. you talked about, but again, you know, if someone is entering a market, they would have done a lot of their own research before they actually invested money, right? So I think that's all I can add. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashid. I think due to the time constraint, let me wrap up with the final question for Nguyen. So Nguyen, given the new normal situation right now, people talk about new normal, right? So do you think that franchising trend and interest will be changed to other segment other than like F&B, education, or retail? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I think there are a lot of different sectors that would benefit from franchising and licensing, besides the notorious F&B industry, which has been the key in driving franchising and licensing in the world for the last how many years. I think for Vietnam at the moment, and especially during and post-pandemic, these are the sectors that I really pay attention to as an investor. First of all is anything relating to medical care. So e-doctor, digital health, telehealth, telemedicine, preventive measures, you know, like gene measuring, stuff like that, DNA, stuff like that would work really well in Vietnam, because everyone needs safety. So everyone needs to look for something to make sure that they will stay healthy and safe in the next few years. Secondly, I think essential goods wise, we come back to you know, learning about the basics in life after the pandemic. So any models that deliver innovative delivery ways of essential goods will do very well in Vietnam as well. And the third is health and wellness. Obviously, you have to stay healthy and you have to take care of your well-being. So physically and mentally, anything that you know, provides health and wellness for people will be A1 in developing in Vietnam, including F&B, you know, organic stuff, health-related stuff, supplements, immunization booster, which is a latest one that someone has asked me on. I think next is beauty and personal care. It goes without saying that, you know, no matter how many pandemics we go through, we still want to look good. So we still want to go to spas, and we still want to go to you know, all the care centers to make us look good. I think the pandemic also has put a lot of pressures into SMEs and companies. So anything B2B services to strengthen enterprises in Vietnam will do very well. So training, coaching, business transformation, functional outsourcing will do really well. Education will do super well, personal development, anything like that, because people now know that I have to go to the next phase of development and I have to integrate into the new normal and the new future. So I want to upgrade myself. And last but not least, digital entertainment. I have to say that being locked down in your own home, you have learned to entertain yourself with digitally. So a case study would be I invested into recently a new company that does AR powered entertainment. So basically you can go fishing with your buddies if you want to, and it's all on augmented reality. So stuff like that will do really well moving forward.
Right. So entertainment is really uptrending in now and near future. Well, thank you, Nguyen, thank you, Khoa and Dr. Rashid, for your very insightful and informative sharing on the outlook and opportunities for doing franchising in Vietnam. Franchising, remains one of the best methods to scale a business globally, no matter how different business model can be. Therefore, franchising knowledge and experience will have both local and foreign business stay in the game despite the industrial revolution. So once again, thank you for your time and stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Hong and fellow panelists.